The Shark Deck.
Hey, what's with all the pictures of John Oliver on Reddit? Hi, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Well, there's some protesting going on. Long story short, Reddit is trying to get rid of third-party apps, and people on Reddit are getting a little cranky. So earlier in June, a bunch of subreddits became inaccessible to protest changes over how the site's being run. Now some have reopened, but some of the bigger subreddits, such as r/aw, r/pics, and r/gifs, have decided to add some rules. Moderators of the r/pics subreddit said that its rules now only allows users to post pictures of John Oliver looking sexy, but they point out that any picture of the comedian is allowed because John Oliver is always sexy. Pete Davidson, charged with reckless driving. Remember earlier this year, he kind of crashed into a house or something like that? Seemed like that kind of got blown over in celebrity court. You know, that how that goes on? Well, no. Greg Reisling is the assistant chief of media relations at the LA County District Attorney's Office, and he said Pete Davidson, being charged with one misdemeanor count of reckless driving, Pete will be arraigned on July 27th. Reisling said, "We believe that Mr. Davidson engaged in reckless driving, which ultimately resulted in his involvement in a serious collision into a home. Luckily, no one was seriously injured as a result of this collision. We know that reckless driving can have devastating consequences." The incident happened back on March 4th around 11 p.m. local time. Pete was driving a car and crashed into a fire hydrant and a home. We'll see what happens on July 27th. Big kerfluffle involving Joe Rogan. Last week, Joe Rogan had on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They had a discussion about the merits of vaccines. Try and catch you up here. RFK Jr. suggested that routine vaccinations cause autisms. That prompted Peter Hotez, who is dean for the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, to label Kennedy's statements as misinformation. Hotez retweeted Vice's story titled, "Spotify has stopped even sort of trying to stem Joe Rogan's vaccine misinformation." Hotez wrote, "Just awful, and from all the online attacks I'm receiving after this absurd podcast, it's clear many actually believe this nonsense." Joe Rogan then offered Hotez $100,000 to debate RFK Jr. on the Joe Rogan Experience. Hotez responded, "Joe, you have my cell, you have my email, I'm always willing to speak to you." Rogan called that reply a non-answer. Hotez said, "Joe, if you're serious about addressing vaccines, plus the fact that 200,000 unvaccinated Americans needlessly perished during our awful Delta/BA.1 COVID waves because they fell victims to vaccine disinformation, I want to have that discussion. I'm happy to come on and have a meaningful discussion. I respect you and your show, and I don't want an adversarial relationship. I think we can make some progress." Elon Musk jumped in and said of Hotez, "He's afraid of a public debate because he knows he's wrong." Hotez responded, "Seriously, Elon, this is monstrous." Andy Kindler, the comedian, wrote, "Unfunny propagandists like Joe Rogan and Jimmy Dore know that countless people have died believing their lives about COVID. They're not that stupid. They are that evil." Mark Cuban took some shots at Rogan, saying, "Way to talk in generalities, Joe." Not saying there aren't a lot of effed up things about pharma, but to ignore that the same industry has saved who knows how many lives is BS, and you know it. It's also disrespectful to all the doctors, researchers, and medical professionals that dedicate their lives to saving lives. Trying to bully Dr. Hotez is ridiculous. You have producers that will prepare you, and you get to control the conversation. Kennedy also has a staff ready to prepare him, and these topics are what he talks about in every speech. You both do this on a daily business, while Dr. Hotez works every day trying to find ways to help people. Joe, you and Elon Musk's Twitter and the mainstream online media and your platforms have become everything supposedly wrong with MSM. You're driven by self-interest, just like the MSM always has been accused of. You both have earned that right. You've busted your asses to be great at what you do and earned all you've accomplished. But don't lie to yourselves and all of us and tell us you're different. You aren't. Salon had a really good interview with Roy Wood Jr. I share that in the Facebook group, which is Daily Comedy News Podcast Group. Please feel highly encouraged to join the group. Roy said, "The thing that sucks is you can deny reality, but somehow your vote still matters. So if your vote still matters, then people have to figure out a way to appease you. To some degree, that means meeting you in the middle a little bit, even if it's infuriating and crazy. When you take a company like Target, putting Pride Month merch in the back of the store, that's the middle ground. That's because they're trying to appease people who live in a totally different reality. They're just trying to sell clothes. The truth is, most of these corporations probably don't care about half the causes they're selling merch for. They know we'll just buy it." And then Roy got in a joke and said, "Yeah, I need to put that in the back of the store, unless it's black owned. Then, of course, I'll support the Juneteenth tank top." Roy continued, "I just think that corporations are in a rock and a hard place. By the way, it's not like Pride Month merch is a new thing, but now all of a sudden they're mad. Now the corporations are having to choose. I think the eventual regression will be corporations not taking any political stances ever again. Most of the stores will become issue neutral. We could say we're not going to boycott the store, but if all the stores take the same stance, what are you going to do? You're going to make your own toilet tissue? You're going to make your own medicine? Last week in Beverly Hills, Howie Mandel, Rachel Bloom, and Michael Rappaport did a show called The Roast of Anti-Semitism. The Times of Israel reports there were countless jokes about anti-Semitic stereotypes. More than one performer mocked the idea that the Jews control the weather, noting the auditorium was pretty warm. Howie Mandel closed out the show, and he made fun of a woman in the front row for falling asleep during his set, saying, "We've been persecuted for 6,000 years. You can't sit for an effing hour?"
Lyle Hall, a cantankerous real estate attorney, has lost the ability to walk after a deadly car crash. But he has also gained something, the ability to read people's thoughts. And not just the living. When a girl's voice calls to him from inside the abandoned Old Vic, Lyle is given hope of regaining the use of his legs. But it quickly turns to fear. This ghostly girl says Lyle's daughter, a rookie detective, will die in 4 days. Can he save her? Find out on the first season of Ghost Hampton, a comedy horror podcast.
The rest of today's podcast is going to be about me feeling old and maybe you guys going, he's old and doesn't get it. But I have a feeling a lot of you are with me on this. Were you aware that the Las Culturistas Culture Awards were even happening? Now, if I tell you they happened at Lincoln Center over the weekend, would you be like, what? Because I was like, what? And I'll remind you, I put this podcast out 7 days a week. I work on it at least 5. I have news trackers. I type in words like comedian and comedy into Google and I see what comes up. I don't know if I just glossed over this. Anyway, apparently the Las Culturistas Culture Awards is an annual thing and it's catching on if it's at Lincoln Center. It's hosted by Matt Rogers and Bowen Yang. It's a parody awards show that has graduated from celebrating culture to creating it in just 2 years, writes Vulture. They now stage a massive production complete with musical numbers and 4-hour-long cues. Gabby was on the line and said, those tickets were harder to get than Taylor Swift tickets. A group of ticket holders confirmed there was a waiting room just like Taylor Swift. As the show began, the line to get in still snaked around the block. One fan said, morale is low, capacity is high. I think it's delusion. Comedian and presenter Charlie Barty said, it's like, we're going to do a fun comedy show in Lincoln Center. And then it was like, oh my God, there's a bajillion people here. Bowen Yang agreed that the show itself is incredibly obtuse. He was interviewed by journalists on an actual red carpet. Performers described the show as gay Coachella, a gay football game, the hottest ticket in Manhattan, and a backyard production of Pippin. And here are some of the winners and losers of the 2023 Las Culturistas Culture Awards, as recapped by Vulture. Winners, teachers, artists, and neighbors. Losers, Annie's Mac and Cheese, because Kraft Mac and Cheese was the sponsor of the night, and the audience was led in a group reading of the famed Las Clutch ad for the product. Annie's can go choke, writes Vulture. Winner, Andy Cohen. He accepted the award for Best Gay Guy, parentheses famous. Loser, the technically correct spelling 90s as in 90s in favor of 90s 90 apostrophe S. Winner, LaGuardia Airport, which won 3 awards and received a video montage set to Glamorous by Fergie. Winner, Cate Blanchett, who won the Cate Blanchett Award for Good Acting. It sounds like it was fun. I had no idea. I did somehow remember that John Early's new special was out on Max, the former HBO Max, although this is an HBO special on HBO on Max, which is not HBO Max, guys. Straighten out your branding and go back to HBO Max. This is very stupid. John Early, now more than ever. I'm going to have some spoilers for it, and this will be the last topic of the day, so if you're planning on watching John Early and don't want me spoiling it, why don't you bail now? Everybody else can hang around for a second. I will give you my general vibe. It left me feeling old. I posted on the Facebook group, again, Daily Comedy News Podcast group. I was watching it, I'm like, is this awful? Is this amazing? I'm not sure I get it. I was entertained. I was confused, and I usually am pretty hip to the alt comedy scene. This one had me feeling the gray hairs on my temples there a little bit. So it's kind of like a mockumentary of a band. He came out, he did a song. I'm not even sure the song was supposed to be funny or not. Then told some jokes. Then we go into like a basic band mockumentary documentary behind the scenes where he's playing himself as a jerkhole. Then they did a cover of a Britney Spears song, then more stand-up comedy. And at one point, about 40 minutes in, I was like, I just don't care. And I watched Cocaine Bear. I know I'm late on this. Oh my God, Cocaine Bear, laugh out loud funny. I have to add Cocaine Bear to the best of 23 list. Let me see how high this is. Is it better than Kunk on Earth? No. Is it better than Kyle Kinane? No. Better than Nate? No. Is it better than Jay McBride? Yeah. All right. Look at this. Slotting in at the number 4 thing of the year. Cocaine Bear. You'll find it on Peacock. Highly recommended. Silly fun. Anyway, back to John Early. The Daily Beast writes, anything less than loud would be a disservice to yourself. You have to hear it blare through your walls. Without that volume cranked, you might miss Early opening a set with a Trump joke, somewhat unexpected from a comic who tends to be more subtle. The joke, and this was actually one of my favorite things of the night, if we look back at the Access Hollywood tapes, not so bad. Trump sounds less predatory in retrospect and maybe a little more like someone who's terrified of sex. Best line of the night. I guess it sounded like locker room talk in that it sounded like me at age 12 in the locker room trying to convince a group of straight guys that I like Lizzie. Then he does that next section. I won't totally spoil it. Very, very funny. The Daily Beast calls the special unpredictable and has to be seen to be fully appreciated. It's shot more like a variety show and less like a conventional stand-up special with multiple cameras zooming in and out to follow Early across the stage. That dynamic range highlights its subject's physicality. I'd be curious to know what you guys thought of the special. Like I said, it left me feeling confused and old. It was entertaining. Does it make the best of 23 list? It probably does, right below Sarah Silverman. So I'm updating the list as I record the podcast. So John Early now at number 10. You want the latest version of the list updated as you listen? All right. Funniest things of 23 so far. Kunk on Earth, Kyle Kinane, Nate Bargatze, Cocaine Bear, Jay McBride, Jim Jeffries, Hari Kondabolu, Chris Rock, The Roast of Mr. Peanut, Big J. Okerson, Sarah Silverman, John Early. Not on the list, Amy Schumer, John Mulaney, Louis Black, Hannah Gadsby, Mark Maron, Andrew Santino, Bert Kreischer, Greg Warren. Did not see Roseanne. Did not see, what's his name from SNL that had the one on Fox. You could just look it up and edit this, John, you know? But that's not fun, guys. Rob Schneider, that's his name. And while I have Rob Schneider in Google, is there any review of Rob Schneider yet? No. That's your comedy news for today. Follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, huh? See you tomorrow. All right, enough with the negativity. Hi, I'm Johnny Mack, host of 5 Good News Stories. It's a podcast twice a week. Every episode, I curate 5 heartwarming, uplifting news stories from around the world, showcasing the best of humanity, tales of kindness, fun animal stories, quirky items in the news, and you know what? More often than not, something about McDonald's. Can't explain why. I'll bring you a range of stories that will leave you feeling hopeful and optimistic. Start your day on a positive note. The number 5 Good News Stories. It'll make you smile to start your day on a good note. 5 Good News Stories, wherever you get your podcasts.